The last Avenkai beacon died, with a hard white flash against the black. Sabeth Oran felt the transit spindle shudder beneath her boots as the severed guide field snapped back through its housings. A cup rattled inside the clip beneath her console. Across the navigation wall, the final green route through Palinode Reach folded into gray. For 1 second, nobody spoke. Then 62 civilian and logistics hulls began calling at once. Sabeth caught her heat-stained drink flask before it jumped free, shoved it back into its bracket, and leaned over the board. Hold every ship inside local orbit. No blind translations. The duty crew obeyed because they had heard what happened to the freighter Lumen Thread the previous week. It had tried to leave on a degraded route and returned with its outer frame twisted and half its guidance vanes locked. Outside the Kiteless transit spindle, the Vorathi blockade tightened. Admiral Terk Knoll had done exactly what he said he would do. He had not fired on cities. He had not threatened civilians. He had not raged across open channels like the villains in bad war dramas. He had simply removed the roads. One by one, Vorathi suppression ships had occupied the 24 navigation points surrounding the Avenkai home system. Every fixed beacon was either jammed, physically cut loose, or forced into emergency shutdown. Heavy blockade cruisers waited beyond them, dark wedges turned inward. Terk's message had arrived before the last beacon failed. Remain inside your system. Accept inspection authority. Do not attempt unauthorized transit. Sabeth had read it twice. The words were cold because they did not need to be hot. Palinode Reach was now a room with no door. Behind her, a soft clicking began. Sabeth turned. On the shelf above the auxiliary control sat a low ceramic bowl containing a starleaf. The plant had come from the magnetic flats of northern Elira. Its narrow silver leaves always leaned toward the strongest stable transit gradient in the room. Routekeepers used them as old-fashioned living checks against instrument drift. Since the blockade began, every leaf had curled toward the dying central beacon. Now that beacon was gone. The starleaf should have folded inward. Instead, one leaf slowly lifted. It pointed away from the spindle, toward empty space. Sabeth, whispered Junior Routekeeper Marin. I see it. The tactical display showed nothing there. No beacon. No ship. No registered distortion. Sabeth checked the plant's bowl, then the nearby field probe. Both were steady. Could be residual flux, Marin said. No, residual flux would pull it toward the old route. Another leaf turned. Then another. All three pointed toward the same empty patch beyond the blockade. Sabeth opened a channel to system defense. I have an unregistered gradient forming beyond kite glass. The defense controller answered immediately. Source. I don't know. On the Vorathi flagship, Terk Knoll watched the same region through a cleaner set of instruments and reached a different conclusion. There is no route there, said his navigation officer. I know. Then the signal is noise. Terk studied it. He disliked explanations that depended on instruments becoming stupid at convenient moments. The Avenkai system was nearly sealed. His crews had spent days mapping every stable approach and every likely emergency vector. He had built the blockade around navigation, not bravado. Ships could cross normal space anywhere, but strategic movement depended on stable translation geometry. Without fixed references, large formations arrived scattered, delayed, or damaged. A fleet that could not enter together could not break a blockade together. The Avenkai understood this. So did every major power nearby. Terk's model was simple because simple models were useful. Control the routes and you control when force can arrive. His navigation officer frowned. Gradient is increasing. Ship emergence. Impossible at that location. Terk almost corrected him. Then space bent. Not violently, not with the blue flare of a standard gate or the broad shimmer of a prepared translation corridor. The darkness seemed to draw a thin line through itself. A long, narrow vessel slipped across that line and returned the stars behind it. Its hull was human. Terk recognized the design family, but not the class. The ship was smaller than the warships he had expected Earth might someday send. It carried no obvious spinal weapon. Its armor profile was clean. Two folded structures lay along its flanks like sheathed blades. The vessel completed translation alone. That mattered. One ship could take a reckless route. One ship could survive a bad calculation. One ship did not change a blockade. Terk touched the command rail. Identify. A signal came before his crew finished. This is Captain Rowan Pike, Earth Transit Guard Vessel Bellwether. We request traffic separation and direct communication with Avenkai route control. Terk's officers looked at him. There was no fear in the room. Only irritation at a variable that had arrived early. Open a channel, Terk said. Sabeth heard Rowan Pike's voice less than a minute later. It was not deep or theatrical. It sounded like someone asking a docking crew to move a crate. Kitegless Bellwether, I need your live gradient map. Sabeth stared at the human ship on her display. You crossed without a beacon. Yes. How? Not safely enough to recommend repeating it alone. That answer annoyed her. You are inside a sealed system. I noticed. The phrase almost made Marin laugh, but Sabeth did not. Captain Pike, the Vorathi hold every exit reference. I know that too. Then why are you here? A pause. Not long. Long enough to feel deliberate. Because you kept a road open for Earth when ours were disappearing. Sabeth stopped moving. Behind her, someone drew in a breath. She remembered the old story because every Avenkai Routekeeper did. Years before Sabeth entered service, Earth had been politically isolated after refusing a regional security compact. Neighboring powers shut down civilian transit agreements one after another. No war followed. No rescue fleet arrived. There had only been the slow tightening of distance. The Avenkai League had been small then. It was still small now. But its root council had refused to extinguish the civilian guide through its territory. Earth traffic had remained legal. Not protected. Not favored. Just allowed to pass. Sabeth's grandmother had been on the council shift that kept the route active. The humans had sent no monument afterward. No treasure. No promise. The route had eventually become ordinary again. Sabeth looked at Bellwether. You crossed a blockade for an old traffic decision. Rowan answered, we crossed because it is difficult to help from the other side. Then his tone changed. Send me your map. That was the first crack in Terk's certainty. The second came when Bellwether moved. A small Avenkai courier named Reed of Glass had been stranded beyond the Spindle's normal holding plane when the last beacon failed. It was not in immediate danger, but its orbital path would carry it close to a Vorathi inspection zone. Sabeth watched Bellwether accelerate toward it. Captain, she said, that courier cannot translate. It does not need to. Two panels opened along Bellwether's hull. Not weapon ports. Anchor bays. Compact machines dropped clear, fired tiny control jets, and separated in a shallow arc. Terk's navigation officer leaned forward. Deployable references. Terk nodded once. That explained the human arrival. Partly. Earth had carried its own guide points. Clever but not revolutionary. Every temporary anchor required stabilization. Every stabilization cycle created a signature, fixed enough to be measured, fixed enough to be attacked. Bellwether placed the devices around reed of glass. Sabeth Starleaf lifted all its leaves at once. On her board, a narrow green corridor appeared where none had existed. "Root is live," Rowan said. "For how long?" Sabeth asked. "Long enough." Bellwether slid beside the Avenkai courier. The two ships translated together. They vanished from the vulnerable holding plane and reappeared near Kite-Glass. Marin slapped his console once. The room released a breath it had been holding for days. It was a small victory. One courier moved a short distance. No blockade cruiser destroyed. No enemy humbled. But Terk saw the consequence clearly. The humans could create local passage. He ordered his officers to stop calling Bellwether an anomaly. "Classify it as a root engineering combat support ship," he said. "Find the stabilization cycle." The Vorathi adjusted. That was why Rowan Pike's first plan failed. Bellwether spent the next hours working with Sabeth's crew to rebuild an outbound corridor. The concept seemed straightforward. Human deployable anchors would be placed in a staggered chain beyond Kite-Glass. The Avenkai would feed local gradient data into them. Bellwether would carry the leading devices forward. Once the chain reached beyond the Vorathi suppression sphere, civilian traffic could translate outward in controlled groups. Rowan never called it easy. But he did expect the anchors to remain unpredictable long enough to establish the line. Sabeth sat on Bellwether's bridge when they began. The human ship felt narrow compared with Avenkai command decks. Restraint straps crossed every navigation chair. The main forward display was smaller than she expected. A condensation tremor ran across the inspection glass above the port fold keel. A human technician wiped it with his sleeve. Ordinary details. That bothered Sabeth more than grandeur would have. Bellwether did not feel like a legendary rescue ship. It felt used. Captain Pike stood behind the pilot station. First anchor away. The machine left the bay. Avenkai data filled its reference lattice. It stabilized. Second away. Then the next. The corridor began to extend. Terk let them build it. His navigation officer noticed that before anyone else. "You are not firing." "No. They are creating an exit. They are showing us how." The officer understood. Every anchor announced a brief, precise phase rhythm while locking to the local gradient. The first differed from the second. The second differed from the third. But the stabilization interval did not. 45 seconds. Not long. Long enough. Terk ordered the nearest suppression cruiser to redirect its phase noise projector. The human crew saw the Vorathi ship move. Rowan frowned. "They are not coming for the anchor." Sabeth checked the projected beam. "They are aiming ahead of it." Rowan's eyes narrowed. The realization arrived one moment too late. The Vorathi projector fired into empty space. The next planned anchor volume filled with artificial phase noise. Bellwether launched anyway. The device entered the disturbed region, tried to stabilize, and began tumbling. Its field collapsed. The corridor snapped. Warning tones struck the bridge. The previous anchor lost synchronization. Then another. On Sabeth's display, the green line broke into isolated pieces. The human technician at the foldkill station grabbed his restraint as the ship lurched sideways. "Recover the anchors," Rowan ordered. "Vorathi intercept closing," said the pilot. Two blockade craft accelerated toward the disabled devices. Rowan looked at the civilian convoy holding near Kite-Glass. The first group had already moved into departure alignment. Now they had nowhere to go. "Pull them back," he said. Sabeth turned toward him. "If we pull them back, the Vorathi will compress the holding zone again." "I know." You will lose the launch window. I know. His voice stayed calm. That did not make the loss smaller. Bellwether burned hard toward the nearest drifting anchor. A Vorathi cutter reached it first. The cutter did not destroy the device. It hooked it with a capture line and dragged it toward the blockade. Sabeth watched the root component disappear behind enemy formation markers. One of their roads had been stolen before it became a road. The second anchor spun too close to a civilian tug. Bellwether diverted. That cost them another chance. A human crewman manually vented a maneuvering pocket to kick the ship across the tug's path. Bellwether passed between the tumbling anchor and the civilian hull with meters to spare. The anchor struck Bellwether's armor instead. Metal rang through the ship. No one cheered. Rowan asked for damage. Anchor bay scraped, fold keel intact. Sabeth looked back at the tactical display. The corridor was gone. The Vorathi had not merely resisted the human plan. They had understood it. Terk opened a direct channel. Captain Pike. Rowan accepted. You crossed without a fixed beacon, Terk said. Impressive. Your deployable references are also impressive, but they still need stable space. Yes. And I control the space in which they stabilize. For the moment, Terk almost smiled. Not because the human sounded arrogant. Because he did not. That made the next decision harder to predict. You cannot build your road, Terk said. Rowan looked toward Sabeth. Not at Terk's image. At Sabeth. Not that road. Then he cut the channel. Sabeth followed him into the narrow engineering passage behind the bridge. Do you have another anchor type? No. A stronger projector? No. A hidden fleet? No. She stopped walking. Then what did you mean? Rowan reached the fold keel inspection glass. The human technician had opened the service panel. Inside, dense timing coils ran beside the ship's structural spine. Rowan tapped the frame. The deployable anchors are the convenient version. Sabeth stared at him. He continued. Bellwether crossed into Palinode without one, because the ship can carry the reference state internally for a short distance. You said you would not recommend repeating it alone. I would not. Then how does that help 62 ships? It does not. He pointed through the glass toward the human hull diagram. But we are not alone anymore. Sabeth looked from the diagram to him. Understanding came slowly. The ships become the references. Sequentially. You only have Bellwether. Not anymore. The human captain sent a signal. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then Sabeth's starleaf moved. Not one leaf this time. All of them. Different directions. New gradients formed beyond the blockade. Thin. Unstable. Approaching. Space folded in 3 separate places. Human Waymakers emerged one after another. Not dreadnoughts. Not carriers. Not the fleet Terk had prepared to fight. Long narrow ships like Bellwether, each with paired fold keels and recessed anchor bays. Terk stood. His navigation officer whispered, "They are root ships." Terk watched their arrival spacing. No. He finally saw the hidden layer. They are the root. The humans did not attack. They moved. Bellwether took the lead. The second Waymaker settled behind and below. Another offset high. The formation looked wrong for a firing line. Perfect for geometry. Each ship held a reference state just long enough for the next to acquire it. Then the next moved. Then the next. The corridor did not appear ahead of the fleet. It appeared inside it. A moving chain. Sabeth returned to Kite Glass as the first Avenkai logistics ship entered alignment. The starleaf on her console trembled violently. Too many gradients. For years, she had treated roots as things that existed in space. Now she watched ships carry them like torches. Terk reacted before the first convoy crossed. Break the chain at its center. Vorathi blockade cruisers accelerated. Heavy guns remained closed. Phase noise projectors did not. Terk had no reason to destroy the humans if disabling their navigation function achieved the same goal. The center Waymaker took the first disruption burst. Its fold keel flickered. Formation spacing widened. Sabeth saw the corridor strain. Bellwether, center reference degrading. Rowan answered, "We see it." The human formation changed shape. Bellwether slowed. The rear Waymaker surged forward and took the unstable reference. A second ship shifted laterally. The chain bent. Not broken. Bent. Terk ordered another projector into the new geometry. This time the humans anticipated it. The leading Waymaker rotated its hull, presenting its armored side to the interference cone, while another ship crossed behind it. The corridor moved again. Terk's officers stared at the tactical plot. "They are maneuvering the road." Terk did not answer. He was busy learning. Humanity had turned a strategic dependency into a formation behavior. That was dangerous. Not because it ignored physics. Because it obeyed physics in a way his blockade doctrine had not considered. He looked at the Avenkai civilian holding area. There was still one way to force the humans into predictable geometry. The fastest corridor out of Palinode passed close to the civilian traffic plane. Terk moved 2 suppression cruisers behind that plane. Not among the civilians. Behind them. A legal position. A careful position. A brutal position without needing brutality. If the humans fired straight through, they risked civilian ships. If they refused, they would have to bend the moving corridor around the traffic, widening the chain and increasing stabilization strain. Terk transmitted openly. "Captain Pike, your shortest path is now occupied." Rowan studied the display. Sabeth saw the answer before he gave it. "Then we take the longer one. That reduces your stability margin." "Yes." "You may lose the corridor." "Yes." "You could remove my ships." "Not through civilian traffic." Terk leaned back. There it was. A limit. A real one. Not weakness. Choice. He ordered the cruisers to hold. The human formation bent away. The route became longer. Harder. Bellwether's fold keels began showing thermal stress. Sabeth's starleaf curled 2 leaves inward. The first Avenkai group entered the moving corridor. The first vessel was a grain carrier called Morning Slate, broad enough that Sabeth could see its cargo spine flex on the external feed. It had never been designed for combat conditions. Its captain sounded older than the ship. "Kiteless, I have the line, tell me when." Sabeth watched the moving references crawl across her board. "Not yet." A Vorathi cutter dipped toward the carrier, forcing Morning Slate to yaw away from its alignment. The move was legal inside local traffic rules and tactically perfect. If the carrier missed the entry angle, the entire departure sequence behind it would stack up. Bellwether changed course. Rowan did not fire. He placed the human ship between the cutter and the carrier. The Vorathi pilot held his approach until the separation alarms on both vessels began sounding. "Captain Pike," Sabeth warned. "I hear them." The cutter moved closer. Bellwether moved closer too. For several seconds, neither ship had room to maneuver without abandoning its purpose. Then the cutter broke away. Not defeated. Displaced. Bellwether had spent precious time and position to give an unarmed grain carrier a clean turn. Morning slate, Sabeth said, now. The carrier entered the corridor. Its bow vanished first, then its cargo spine, then the battered engine housing. A heartbeat later, it reappeared beyond the inner suppression ring. The route held. Every ship waiting behind it saw the same thing. So did Terk. He had expected the humans to protect the corridor because it was strategically useful. Instead, they had risked the corridor to protect the traffic using it. That distinction gave him another weapon. If restraint could move human ships out of optimal geometry, then restraint could be forced to cost them again. And he intended to make that cost immediately unavoidable. Their hulls vanished one by one from local space, reappeared farther out, still inside the blockade, but beyond the tightest ring. Progress. At a cost. The second group began aligning. Then Terk launched his strongest counter. He stopped targeting the empty anchor volumes. Stopped targeting the center of the chain. He targeted Bellwether. Not with a killing strike. With concentrated phase noise and precise disabling fire against the port fold keel housing. The first shot missed. The second struck armor. Bellwether rolled. The moving corridor twisted. Sabeth grabbed her console as every warning tone in kite glass merged into one. The starleaf snapped flat. Bellwether. Rowan's voice came through under static. Still here. The port fold keel failed to reopen. One of the human route links disappeared. The next Waymaker could not acquire Bellwether's reference state. The corridor froze halfway through its motion. Avenkai ships already outside the inner ring were safe. Those still inside were trapped again. Terk had found the right target. For the first time since the human formation arrived, Rowan did not answer immediately. His bridge crew worked around him. Damage calls. Timing checks. Field stability. Sabeth heard strain in every voice except his. Not because he felt none. Because he was using his attention somewhere else. Captain, Sabeth said, your port keel is gone. I know. You cannot hold the lead reference. Not symmetrically. The word caught her. Sabeth looked at the starleaf. It had not folded completely. One narrow leaf pointed toward a faint local gradient along the system's upper orbital inclination. A route no fixed beacon had ever used. Too shallow for the standard Avenkai maps. She remembered survey data from before kite glass was built. Old magnetic tides near the outer moon cluster. Irregular. Uncomfortable. But real. Sabeth, Rowan said. I have a gradient. Send it. It is not on the current chart. Send it. She did. The data crossed. Bellwether's navigation system rejected it. Rowan overrode the warning. Terk saw the human ship rotate. Why are they changing plane? His navigation officer searched. No registered route. Of course not. The answer came out before Terk meant to say it. A blockade owns yesterday's map. The thought was not admiration. It was diagnosis. Bellwether fired its remaining starboard fold keel. Asymmetric field pressure pulled the ship sideways. The hull shuddered. The inspection glass above the keel fogged white. A technician strapped himself down and kept one hand on the manual timing controls. Reference unstable, he said. Rowan asked how long. 71 seconds before I would prefer we stop pretending this is wise. Good. That was not enough time for the entire convoy. Sabeth knew it. Rowan knew it. Terk knew it as soon as the timing signature appeared. He ordered the nearest cruisers upward. Cut the new plane. Vorathi ships turned. The human chain turned with them. The next Waymaker acquired Bellwether's uneven reference. Then the next. The road climbed. Not smoothly. Not safely. But it existed. Sabeth fed local gradient corrections through kite glass. Her crew stopped thinking in terms of fixed route points. They began thinking in moving relationships. Convoy group forward. Avenkai ships translated. Another group aligned. The Vorathi cruisers closed. Rowan had a clean firing solution on the lead suppression ship. His weapons officer called it. He refused. The suppression cruiser was drifting close to a civilian carrier's projected path. Hold. That ship is going to hit the chain. Hold. Sabeth heard the cost in his voice now. Terk heard it too. He pushed harder. One Vorathi cruiser crossed the moving corridor's edge and fired another phase burst. The rear Waymaker lost synchronization. For 3 seconds the entire chain existed as separate ships, with no usable path between them. The convoy stopped. Terk stood over his command rail. Again. The cruiser fired. Bellwether's damaged hull shook. The technician at the timing console shouted that the reference was slipping. Rowan looked at the Avenkai ships. Looked at the Vorathi. Then at Sabeth's data. Move the lead. His pilot stared. We are the lead. Not anymore. Bellwether dropped backward. The second Waymaker surged past it. For the first time, the damaged ship stopped trying to own the corridor's front. The chain rebuilt around a new leader. Terk's next phase burst struck where Bellwether would have been. Empty space. The human formation had adapted again. Sabeth understood what Rowan had done. The Waymaker doctrine did not depend on one heroic ship. Any functioning member could become the next reference. The road had no fixed front. That was the category death proof. Not speed. Not armor. Not hidden firepower. A blockade could seize a beacon. Destroy a gate. Surround a station. But it could not permanently control a route that migrated from ship to ship faster than the blockade could identify its next center. The next Avenkai convoy group crossed. Then another. The holding zone around Kiteglass began to empty. Terk's navigation officer spoke quietly. Admiral, containment condition is failing. Terk knew. He also knew the battle was not over. One last option remained. He could order his heavy cruisers to physically occupy the new transit plane. Not fire through it. Become obstacles inside it. The humans would have to divert again or risk collision and field collapse. He gave the order. 3 Vorathi wedges moved. Sabeth saw them coming. Captain Pike, they are blocking the plane. Rowan was breathing harder now. Expected. You expected this. No, I expected him to keep trying. That was more believable. The lead Waymaker began another bend. Too wide. The remaining stability window was falling. Sabeth checked the outer gradient. The starleaf shook. Then one leaf turned toward a narrow space between 2 Vorathi cruisers. Not a route. A relationship. A gap that would exist only if both enemy ships continued their current burns. She marked it. Rowan, I have a moving window. How long? Short. Send it. Terk saw the Avenkai transmission. He guessed what it contained. Cruiser left, tighten separation. His ships adjusted. The gap shrank. Sabeth updated. The humans updated. Terk adjusted again. Now the contest was not firepower. It was attention. Prediction. Timing. The blockade commander tried to close a space that existed only because he was moving to close it. Rowan saw the paradox before Terk did. "Maintain course," he ordered. His pilot looked at him. "They are closing the gap." "Exactly." Bellwether continued backward in the chain. The lead Waymaker held. The Vorathi cruisers tightened. Their own suppression fields began interfering with each other. One flickered. The gap did not vanish. It changed shape. Sabeth Starleaf snapped toward the new line. Now, the lead Waymaker moved. The human chain compressed. Avenkai's ships entered behind it. Terk ordered his cruisers apart. Too late. Their mutual phase noise had created a brief pocket of cleaner geometry between them. The humans used it. The corridor passed through the blockade itself. Not by overpowering the Vorathi. By forcing their counter into becoming the next usable condition. Terk watched the first Avenkai civilian carrier translate through the opening. Then another. Then Bellwether. The damaged human ship vanished last from the inner ring and reappeared beyond his containment line. No explosion marked the moment. No flagship died. Nothing dramatic happened to his body or his bridge. Only the map changed. The Avenkai system was no longer sealed. That fact was enough. Terk closed his hand around the rail. "Cease pursuit." His weapons officer looked at him. "Admiral, the containment objective is invalid. We can continue pressure." "Pressure toward what?" The officer had no answer. Terk did. If he kept fighting, he might damage ships. He might even destroy one. But he could no longer restore the strategic condition on which his orders depended. The roads were moving. He opened a channel to Bellwether. Rowan appeared with one shoulder restraint still clipped across his chest. The human captain looked exhausted. Terk respected that more than calm perfection. "Your vessel classification is incorrect in our records," Terk said. Rowan waited. Waymaker craft are listed as navigation support assets. They support navigation. Terk ignored the dry answer. They are strategic mobility combat assets. Rowan looked toward someone off-screen. "Send the paperwork to Earth." Terk almost laughed. Instead he said, "The mandate will withdraw from the inner Palinode containment line." "That is wise. Do not mistake my conclusion for gratitude. I was not planning to." That answer mattered. This had never been about forcing Terk to like humanity. It was about making the old model impossible to keep. The withdrawal began slowly. Vorathi ships opened distance from Kitegless. Suppression arrays powered down. Not all at once. One by one. Sabeth watched the gray scars disappear from her navigation board. Avenkai traffic controllers began rebuilding local order. No one declared victory over the system channel. There was too much work. Civilian ships needed new departure windows. Cargo routes had to be reassigned. Damaged anchors had to be recovered. Bellwether needed repairs. Sabeth took a shuttle to the human ship before it left the outer transit plane. She found Rowan near the same fold keel inspection glass. The condensation had cleared. A cracked access panel lay open beside him. "You should replace that keel before translating again," she said. "That is the current argument. Are you winning it?" "No." Good, she thought. Humanity had not arrived invulnerable. It had arrived useful. Sabeth held out a small ceramic bowl. Rowan looked at the Starleaf. "You are giving me your plant." "No." She placed it on the shelf beside the inspection glass. "I am letting it judge your repairs." Rowan studied the leaves. They were open now. not pointed in a single direction. Several stable gradients crossed the local space as human and Avenkai traffic moved through the new corridor. For a moment he said nothing. Then he asked, "Did your grandmother really keep the Earth route open?" "Yes." "Did she ever say why?" Sabeth remembered the answer exactly. Not because it had become a famous quote. Because it had never been one. She said closing a road was easy to regret after everyone forgot how to open it. Rowan nodded. No speech followed. No declaration of eternal alliance. Outside the glass, Vorathi ships continued withdrawing. Terk's flagship approached the edge of the new shared transit volume. Its old route home had been disrupted by the same suppression pattern his own fleet had created. His navigation officer gave him the available options. They could wait for their outer beacons to reset. Or they could accept a temporary corridor already stabilized by the human Waymakers. Terk considered the irony for less than a second. Use the corridor. His officer hesitated. Human-controlled. A road is not surrender. The flagship aligned. On Bellwether, the Starleaf turned one silver leaf toward it. Sabeth watched that movement. Years ago, the Avenkai had kept one road from going dark while Earth stood alone. Now no monument marked the repayment. No treasury changed hands. No empire knelt. A human route ship with a damaged keel held steady, while an Avenkai controller cleared traffic, and a Vorathi flagship departed through a passage its own blockade had failed to close. The Starleaf opened another leaf. Then another. And beyond the glass, ships were moving both ways.